I think also choosing Minecraft for this is probably a good idea on my part, not to stroke myself off too much, but like because of Minecraft's inherent nature as a, you know, a relatively peaceful game, I think it provides the opportunity for a lot more balance. Just like my normal little reflections on the semester and stuff, because, wow, because that is a skeleton spawner. Okay. I think this semester has certainly been a semester. I sound like a millennial. Well, I certainly did a thing. Yeah, it was work. It certainly was work. Me when I'm working. But I don't know. I feel like it wasn't necessarily to some of the very extreme bad of like some previous ones. Or I guess not extreme bad. You are bad news. You are an extreme bad. I don't know. Of course, there's my always inherent nature to be introspective. As I was saying, I think there's, of course, my inherent nature to be introspective a lot. Because I always am introspective. Because I'm always trapped in my own mind. So, of course, I would have a lot of thoughts about it. But I think just this semester provided a lot of opportunities for thinky. A lot of thinky time. Shit, it's getting to be nighttime. I've been trying to get into reading more recently. It's a struggle. Because I'm doing nonfiction rather than fiction. And I know there's plenty of fiction books out there that I would really like, most likely. Like, I've heard so many amazing things about Red Rising. Which is... Don't look at me, don't look at me, don't look at me. Which is, I believe, a book about some, like, dwarves or miners stuck underground on this alien planet, and it's like kind of a bit about like class consciousness, consciousness, and like I've heard amazing things from people time and time again, like so many different people over the many years. So like I bet I would like that book. Where am I? Oh, I'm here. Or, I don't know. What's another book, good book I've heard things about? That's really it. But that's like a book series, I believe. And so, like, I could read those. I would bet. I would bet there's also lots of fiction books out there. But I'm trying to get learned. I'm trying to get learned. And, I have some books about, like, economics and shit. I have... What is it? Scott Galloway's, like, 100 Facts About the World. Or whatever. That he made, like, a few years ago or something. That's, like... I don't know. Scott Galloway. He's smart. He's a bit of a lib. But he says good stuff. Is he ever, like, self-righteous? Maybe, like, at certain points. But it's like balanced, I feel, a lot of the times. So I don't know. So I've been looking for more like, not quite escapism, but like more big picture in a way. So I've recently been reading The Myth of Sisyphus by Albert Camus. Just because I always like philosophy. I tried reading like, for my second time ever, I tried reading like The Full History of Philosophy, which is this book that like just goes through philosophy over time when like different theories were created and stuff by who were key players, like all this different stuff. I normally get to a bit past like Buddhism and then I tap out. And this is my second time now. Because it's like, I certainly like philosophy. I find philosophy interesting. It oftentimes feels overly complex, unnecessarily complex, and perhaps even full of itself. But I think it as a field is certainly interesting. I more care about, like, what is it? Not metaphysics. more like existentialism, which is like metaphysics is, if I'm correct, it's more of like ethical philosophy. It's like what my philosophy class that I had this semester was, which is about like, why do we do stuff that we consider good? What is a good act? It's like, well, there's different thoughts about it. There's the idea of like a good act is something that brings about the most good, the most net happiness. So like, you know, is it a good act to go to the store and buy Sour Patch Kid? Well, it gives you +5 happiness points. So then, yeah, it's better than the alternative, which is sitting around and not getting a Sour Patch Kid. But there's also equally the argument of like, okay, well, if we say that one person, our professor asked us if we wanted to do this for the class, he legitimately, seemingly legitimately offered it. It's like, if we want to do it, we could do one person in this class automatically gets an F, but everyone else gets a B or higher for the rest of the semester. And so then it's like this idea of like, okay, well, this one person's certainly getting fucked over, but the rest of us now don't have to give a shit about this class, so there's higher net happiness. It's like, well, there's ethical considerations there. If there's someone who is goes to Mars with other people and like on a space trip or whatever, and there's a huge sandstorm and everyone gets injured in a different way except for this one guy, and they all need a different kind of like organ transplant. They each need different organs. Is it up to this one guy who is healthy to then, ignoring the fact that like there's no one to do the transplant, like, I don't know, assume there's a fucking robot that can do it for, like, is it then up to this guy, is he then morally responsible to then sacrifice himself as the one individual so that then his organs can be harvested for all the others, save them? It's essentially the idea of the trolley problem. Do you pull the trolley? If there's a trolley going to kill 3 people, do you pull the lever so that then it only kills 2 people? By a utilitarian perspective, the answer is clearly yes, because you are like saving more people. But that's like not so fun, because then you're killing someone. And so then from the other perspective, we learned about like, it really felt like there was like 2 main ones we learned about, which was, there were 3 we learned about, but it was more like 2 that kind of opposed each other. And then a third one, which was like also there. So we also learned about Kantianism, which is deontology, I believe is the name for it. We never referred to it as that, but I outside of class saw it referred to as that. I don't need this coal. We outside of class just saw it referred to as that. Do I have full armor? I do. That's great. And so that's from Immanuel Kant, who was definitely autistic, said he never once masturbated in his whole life, and would go through town at the exact same time every single day, to the point that people would be able to time him every day, and like it would always correspond with their schedules, like almost down to the second. The flaw in Kantianism comes about in like, okay, well, what if you're protecting Anne Frank, which is, I guess, an relevant analogy to bring up, given the Ethan Klein Hassan debate and their discussion of Anne Frank. But if you talk about Anne Frank, if you're thinking about Anne Frank, then, okay, well, the Gestapo come to your house. They say, do you have Anne Frank with you? Well, the moral thing, if you're assuming under those basic universal principles that we talked about, of like, you can't do something that like invalidates something else if it's a universal law, then based on that, you'd have to be like, yeah, I have Anne Frank. Here's where she is. But like, everyone can kind of agree, you fucking protect Anne Frank, whether or not she's a pacifist. she's still a noteworthy character, whether or not she's a pacifist, Ethan Klein. But you protect Anne Frank. So then what do you do? Because the idea was that, like, you can't do something universal. So if you're lying, you're now saying that's universal, and now you're taking someone's will and turning it against them. Because they want the will to be able to, like, get Anne Frank. But under Kantianism, the counter-argument to that is that, well, in the first place, they were violating someone else's will. I should also circle back to counter-argument to utilitarianism. But in the first place, they were, like, violating someone else's will. They're violating someone else's will by, like, trying to catch Anne Frank. So then you are not obligated to use those same principles against them because they're violating them. And so then you would be free to do it. So in short, Kantianism would be pro-Hamas. Immanuel Kant would be pro-Hamas. But, but also there's a lot of counter-arguments to that. Because it's like, it's based on the idea of logic and, like, one's reason and shit. And so, like, I was making the argument of, like, because we had to do debates for this in class. And I was tasked with arguing against it. And I was like, okay, well, what the fuck are you? Why do you look so weird? I said, like, okay, I have to go pee right now. Like, I gotta go pee. But there's scientific studies that show that, like, if you have to go pee, you'll perform better under pressure. I think this is real. I'm pretty sure that's real. Because, like, it's more pressure on you, and then you're just, like, forced to be physiologically more alert. So then we're in this group debate right now. Would it then be fucked up if I went to go pee? Because, like, my group mates, they probably, based on their own logical reasoning, like, they want me at full alertness. But I gotta go pee, and I want to go pee. So then who's violating whose will if I were to go pee? Are they violating mine by wanting me to not to? Or am I violating theirs by going to when they don't want me to? And that's like a bit of a weak argument. But I then, what else did I fucking say? Oh, I forgot my exact argument. I made some point about, like, a girl who went to eat a muffin. I was like, well, what if I wanted that same damn muffin? Are you violating my free will? That sucks. Or, like, what about the fact that if I came into this debate feeling so unprepared to talk about Kant, and then my teammates, like, I genuinely think that because of the way the grades were structured, I genuinely logically think, because Kant was very much based on logic, I logically think that if I were to continue performing in this debate, I would hurt my team a lot. More than the automatic minus 10% that they would get if I were to never speak at all. Am I full? No, I just haven't picked up that copper. So then is it my free will to try to help them for me to then leave and not do this debate in the first place? Or is that then, like, fucked up of me because they might want me to stick around so that they don't automatically get the minus 10? So then which is it? Or, like, our professor, he said that he was, like, he kind of held Kantian beliefs. He said that a lot near the beginning of class. And I was like, well, fucking, we don't want to do debates. Like, that's our will. We don't want to do debates. Most of the people in the class don't want to do this debate. Because most of the people in the class go to a film school and are socially anxious. And this is also ethics class, so it's mostly... Sorry. So it's, I didn't say this, but it's mostly white women with anxiety who are pro-choice. And so, like, if we don't want to do this debate, none of us want to do this debate. Or very few of us want to do this debate. But our professor is deciding that we are forced to do this debate. So in a way, he is violating our own free will. So is he then breaking Kant's principles? Because it doesn't seem like there is a clear logic here. Should we do this debate or not? I should also make the point in trying to explain utilitarianism. So that's the one where you do like net happiness. Of like, it kind of falls apart when you start thinking about it too mathematically. Because it's like, okay, I get a certain amount of happy when my newborn child is born and I look at them in the eyes. And I'm like, yo, that's crazy. But I also get maybe less happy from Sour Patch Kid. So how many Sour Patch Kids do I need to get to then equal having a child? And there isn't really a utilitarian come back to that. So we learned about those two. And then I think that was helpful. Like, while I certainly found those interesting, like, that's not really the kind of part of philosophy that I find as interesting as a whole. We also learned about the idea of, like, Aristotelian ethics, which, like, I think is different than is different from metaphysics. I think they're different. But metaphysics is also from Aristotle, so it gets a little confusing. I believe it's from Aristotle. But anyway, I digress. Is that the right word? Whatever. But, so, the Aristotle viewpoint is where it kind of starts to overlap more with, like, kind of the almost to be to not to be part of ethics, in which, like, you know, a utilitarian would say that you should pick the job that benefits society the most. Like, what you should do with your life is whatever benefits the society the most. And, like, whatever everyone should do is, like, what would benefit the society the most. And so there is kind of this uniting principle of what is good. And kind of similar under Kant, because it's like, okay, well, like, there is some uniting logic here of what is good and what is not good, and so we should all do what's good. Whereas Aristotelian ethics is more like, no. Like, there's kind of a chief good, but, like, not really. Like, there is a chief good that everyone should achieve for, but it's not universal. It's not everyone has the same goal, the same good. In that, like, our goods vary from person to person. Your goods may be one thing, my chief good may be another thing. And so, instead, what you should do is pursue that. And that's what's ethical. And it's, like, kind of a bit of a cop-out, low-key. Because it's like, okay, it's not so much rating things on, like, their function in society, what's ethical and what's not. Or it's not a great comparison between that and, like, those other kinds of ethics I just mentioned. Like, it doesn't necessarily stand in opposition, I feel. Or, like, it kind of does, perhaps, in the saying that there isn't a chief good that you need to follow. But, like, those were the kinds of philosophy we learned about. The one issue with the kind of Aristotle philosophy is that it's like, everyone needs to go find what their chief good is, what they're best at, so that they can, it's all about the pursuit of this, like, feeling of eudaimonia, which is supposed to be this, like, pure moment, this moment of, like, pure bliss that we're all supposed to discover and achieve. And it's, like, varies from person to person how you do that. So it's like, okay, so it's up to you. The telos is, like, the method that you can find that in. So you need to go develop your own telos. You need to go, like, find that and discover that. And so it's like, I think then teleology, is that it? Is, like, then this idea of, like, okay, now you, like, going and figuring that out. The flaw in that, though, is that it's, like, it's very, like, conceptual, I guess. And that it's like, okay, just go do it. It's like, well, how? Well, I don't know. Just go, find what's best for you. Well, I don't know what's best for me. Well, kind of like, too bad. It's like, you know, you go find it. And also, admittedly, I think Aristotle kind of had it from more classist viewpoints, where he was like, yeah, well, there's, like, some people that, like, low-key it doesn't fucking matter. Like, low-key, don't worry about this shit. Like, you're fine. Just keep doing what you're doing. And it's like, I think because I was like kind of siding with like slaving and shit. So like that's kind of fucked, obviously. But like those are kind of like, besides the Aristotle, which more begins to dabble in like what's the point of it all kind of a philosophy. Like those are more, I believe, metaphysics. I believe that's metaphysics. Or ontology, is that it? It's not oncology, that's cancer. I think it's metaphysics. And there might be some on whatever. Like, that's that kind of philosophy. I'm gonna help you down from up there. And it's like, those are interesting, admittedly. I won't deny that. But I don't find them as interesting as more of like the what's the fucking point of it all philosophy. Which I believe like the big picture of that is like, the catch-all term for that is existentialism. Actually, I may be wrong. Let me Google that. Branches of philosophy. Yeah, so metaphysics is what we were talking about. Wait, but what's the difference between metaphysics? No, metaphysics is this. Metaphysics is this of what's the point. Ethics, philosophical ethics is what I was just talking about. No, I don't believe, is existentialism really like its own kind of branch of philosophy? Because, like, low-key, I don't fuck with that. No, metaphysics is, like, Pythagorean theorem. So I was talking about ethics. But then I guess, yeah, I guess existentialism is kind of like its own branch. And so existentialism includes... This is now back off the dome. Existentialism includes, like... Existentialism's its own idea and its own philosophy, but then I guess as a branch it also includes things like nihilism and absurdism, because the idea of the branch is like an analysis of why do we live, like what's the point. And so like obviously everyone, I feel like nihilism has become a very commonly understood concept, perhaps in a watered down way that is maybe inaccurate. The idea that like, well, nothing fucking matters. But I think, I don't know, there's certainly some history there that I'm unfamiliar with about nihilism. Because, like, of course, Nietzsche, however you say his name, was a nihilist. And he, like, kind of created the whole thing, or at least popularized it. But I believe he was, like, he did that, I don't know. This is a combination of hearing it from different places. But I think it's like, he started off an existentialist. Or I guess I should start by explaining existentialism. Or existential, whatever. Which is kind of like I think it's like, it started as like a deviation from essentialism. So essentialism is the idea that like, okay, you're here for a reason. No, is that it? Is that fucking it? What is essentialism? Essentialism's like I think it's like you're here for a reason. Acknowledges the primary of essence. Oh, come on. Everything has an essence. So everything is like made of something. Right? Essentialism is everything has a purpose. And then existentialism is more like we have a purpose. Or like there is a purpose to our lives. Essentialism's like part of metaphysics. In that like the building blocks of life. Existentialism versus essentialism. Let me read this random Medium article. Essentialism. People and things have natural and essential common characteristics. They're all inherent and unchanging. there's all an underlying reality that one cannot observe directly. And it kind of leans itself to God, I think. Whereas existentialism is more like you can find your own meaning. There is meaning. Yeah. So it's like, okay, so essentialism is like there is a specific meaning low-key for everyone. And like that might just be God or religion or whatever. And then existentialism is that like, well, no, there isn't a specific meaning, but like there is a meaning, and it's up to you to find that meaning. And like everyone has their own meaning, I think. But then in response to that, there was then the creation of nihilism, which was that nothing fucking matters. There is no meaning. And I think then that gets commonly misinterpreted to perhaps be overly doomer. At least more than it's intended to be. Because I don't think that viewpoint by itself is meant to be like, nothing matters, anarchy, burn everything down, everything sucks, get depressed and shit. I think it's more of that, like, in a lighthearted way. Well, nothing matters. We're all gonna die. We're just little flat pieces of goo on this watery marble in the middle of the galaxy. So, whereas of course it's like, contrast that with existentialism, where it came from, which is more like, well, there is a purpose. Shit's confusing, but there is a purpose. And so then those are like those two opposing things. And so if I'm correct, I think Nietzsche, I don't know. I'm not a Nietzsche fan, nor am I a hater, but he started off as an existentialist. Am I saying that right? Existentialist. He started off as an existentialist, and then maybe he got turned to the dark side and went all nihilist. But I think in his later life, he then realized like, oh, people gonna get like really depressed for my shit. And so I don't know if he converted back to an existentialist or if he was just like, no, nihilism's not that depressing. But then I think like it kind of got picked up. He died. Then his sister, who was like a literal Nazi back in Germany, picked it up. She made it so that it was more Nazi-y. And then after the Nazis, you know, died, then people were like, yo, not this Nazi-y. Like, not to this degree. And so then she like laid back, or then they fixed it. But then kind of during this time, then was Camus, who I personally find the most interesting. Because it's more of the idea of that everything is meaningless. But the meaning is the meaninglessness. Or the meaning is struggling with the meaninglessness, in a way. Like, the meaning is the daily meaninglessness. And so that is, like, why there's been this is like a year or two ago at this point, but the meme of the myth of Sisyphus, which was, like, it's this, you know, this tale from Greek mythology of this guy who's forever punished by Zeus, and he has to, like, every single day push a boulder up a mountain. And that's his daily task, and he has to do it every day. And then at the end of every day, it rolls all the way back to the bottom. And so then it's like, you know, I think the existentialist would say, like, okay, well, the purpose is to get it to the top, I guess. The existentialist would say that perhaps in you could maybe say more naive idea set to say, well, there is some point. You're pushing it to the top. The nihilist would say, there's no point, because it keeps rolling back down. So what's the point, I think. Again, I'm not that knowledgeable in nihilism, nor really any of these, but it's from, like, online searches and investigations. But then the absurdist would say, well, there isn't a point. Or if there is a point, there's not necessarily a point. But if there would be a point, it would just be pushing the fucking boulder up every single time. Because that's all there is to life. Life is just the daily mess. Life is what you do. It's the things that exist, no matter how illogical they may feel. And so, to kind of mentally deal with that, and to deal with the way these things fit into our lives, is to deal with the absurd. And it's to struggle to that. This is from reading The Myth of Sisyphus, the book that Camus wrote. I'm like, I don't know, maybe a fourth of the way in. That's maybe being generous. And so, like, you know, that's the point. The point is that is the boulder. You push the boulder. That's the point. It's what you do every day. That's the point. There's no use in debating that. There's no use in crying over that, because it's just kind of what it is. And to give up would be to give up on meaning. He talks about at the start of the book that, like, he almost starts it as like an attack at nihilism, because maybe nihilism was just popular at the time, or I don't know. But he starts off by saying, like, well, look, nihilists argue that nothing's the point. There is no point. Life is meaningless. And that then maybe the logical solution would be suicide to end the meaninglessness. But how many nihilists have committed suicide? And he's like, only 3. Only like 3 real nihilists committed suicide. And like, this isn't a laughing matter. This is still suicide we're talking about. But like, there have only been 3 people who have reasoned through nihilism in order to reach the point that is that suicide is the answer. So like, that's clearly an indication of something that perhaps it's not. And so that instead, I'm gonna torch this area up so I know where it is. I don't know. So instead there's some point, even though there is no point. And so the point is the fact that there is no point. The point is the daily struggle, the dailiness of things. And I think, like, I find that philosophy certainly the most interesting out of the ones I'm knowledgeable of. Because I would feel it's one that I don't know. It feels like a mix, a solid mix of the dreariness of nihilism. Even if nihilism is incorrectly portrayed and there is actually some meaning in it. Or there is no meaning, but there is meaning that you can find, or there is solace in it. Alright, you two will attack each other. And then like a good mix between that and like raw existentialism, which almost feels too happy-go-lucky at times. Like, there is a point. Well, what's the fucking point? If it's up to me to find the point, then I don't know what the fucking point is. How am I supposed to find the point? And then goes back to the criticism of Aristotle. Where is this point that we're talking about? Is it in the room with us right now? I'm likely very falsely discussing these points. But that's fine. But so it feels like a solid mix, because it's like, well, there is no point. Because it kind of feels like there isn't. You ever think about that? Like, what's the point? The point is one's own personal satisfaction. Well, then we're kind of back to utilitarianism. But that's not a way to think about life. That's a way to think about your actions. And so if you go about all your life thinking about what benefits you as the individual, then you should just sit around and masturbate all day and eat chocolate. That's nearly a direct quote from my professor. He's like, well, then that seems like that's the point. But it's like, okay, then that's purely just like appealing to your own desires. Whereas in reality, the point is the struggle. The point is the looking back at the boulder, realizing what you did, and then realizing the next day you're going to push it back up and finding some solace in that. Finding content in that. Satisfaction. But yeah, so I've been trying to get back into reading. It's just a struggle. Because I think, admittedly, while I do find these concepts incredibly interesting, they're still dense. And it's written in like 1940s, what, Camus French, I think. And then it's translated into English, so like 1940s translated English. So I've also been starting like creating a list of new words that like the translation uses that are just unfamiliar to me and putting them in my vocabulary or trying to incorporate them into my vocabulary. But like, I find that interesting, and because I also feel like that kind of thought, while simultaneously depressing, also helps one become a more well-rounded individual to think about things such as, what's the point? Like, what are we doing here? Because in a way that kind of feels like, I mean, philosophy as a whole kind of, to a lot of people, I could see as just being entertainment for those who have the ability to think about more than just themselves, more than just the material needs. But I think it can equally be a useful tool. And I think also whether or not one wants to fucked with my eye there. Whether or not one wants to acknowledge it, it is still a core building block of like our lives, is how your perception of the world. And that like maybe just because you reject the idea of philosophy doesn't mean that you reject its practice. Because if you go through life daily in the toil and you come out of it feeling exhausted and like there is no point and exhausted from it and like maybe you should just put an end to it, then even though you might say, well, philosophy is for those rich enough to be able to spend their time thinking about it, you have found yourself in a nihilistic perspective. If you see that life is just like the purpose is to provide wealth for your family and to, you know, make suffering or provide comfort that way, then, you know, even if it doesn't feel like philosophy, even if it feels like common knowledge, logic, then still existentialism. Yeah, okay. So I'm trying to read that because it's interesting, but it's also dense. And I also feel like, I don't know, it feels like a cop-out to, even with these old theories and shit, how, like, dated their wording is to the time period. Like, it kind of feels like a cop-out to be like, oh, well, I'm just going to use the Spark Notes and then say that I read it. Because then you didn't fucking read it. You didn't. You ingested its ideas, perhaps, but you didn't read it. Part of reading is the struggle to understand it. It's not just the sludge entering your brain, ingesting the ideas. If you want to do that, just fucking read the scrolling bit of text that's at the bottom of the 24-hour news cycle. There you can just ingest pure knowledge. Or just read, I don't know. Read whatever. There's no, like, you just want that raw slop. The point of reading an ancient philosopher, the point of reading a philosopher is to understand their perspective. And to think about it and be forced to think about it. See how it fits into your own way of thinking that you've established independently. So you're not doing that if you're just watching some fucking YouTube short about it. Anyway. Alright, let's make a diamond pick. I don't know. I find philosophy interesting. Because, like, what is the point? You know? I mean, maybe that's just me saying it because it's someone struggling to find the point. I think it's easy to say what the point is when you feel like you've already achieved it in a way. When you're content with the way that you're thinking. Whereas if you're not, or if you're thinking too much, or content with the way you're living, I should say, not the way you're thinking. If you're content with it enough that you don't need to find justification, or to find reason behind it, or to look for reason, I don't know. And I think also I'm seeing more the value of It's gonna sound dumb. Reading. More recently. Because it's like seeing things. I don't know, like even that moment during the stream yesterday where I realized like, oh shit, this is what we're talking about here is similar to that of the what I read in a book for one of my classes. Like I think reading nonfiction is, I don't know, something underrated that I hadn't previously thought about as much. Because previously I had just seen nonfiction as like nonfiction storytelling. It's like, well, that's kind of fucking boring. I don't care about history that much. I mean, even though there are times where history is relevant and interesting, it's like, all things considered, I don't care about it that much. But it's like, also, nonfiction is also just like people's thoughts and shit. And like, those are good too. Those can be helpful too. So, like, what we were watching yesterday of the Ethan Klein debate, there were notes certainly being picked up there that were akin to that of what I read about from people who were like, where did I put it? Maybe I didn't do it high enough. Similar to people who wrote about like civil rights movement and shit. So reading from them, spotting the similarities. It's interesting. Helps. Certainly from a rhetorical perspective as well, because you can be like, oh, well, I fucking read this author, and then you sound smarter. Where's the damn poll? It's just hard. I don't know. I think the first nonfiction book that I really read, Bones. Hello, doggy. How could I get you Bones? Well, I know you're here now. So I guess I can go sleep, grab Bones, and then grab you. I think the first nonfiction book that I felt like really stuck with me was, I read it in maybe senior year, end of senior year, right before college. It was The Algebra of Happiness by Scott Galloway. I had previously read some nonfiction books before that, but they were mostly like self-help books, and those kind of blow as for a large part. And Algebra of Happiness is certainly more interesting. I think it's like, I don't know. I like, that was what kind of made me fall in love with Scott Galloway's style, writing style, despite the fact that he's exhibits some annoying liberal tendencies, but that's besides the point. But like, I don't know, how he's able to very bluntly talk about these things in a way that feels very personable and amicable, and like both full of yourself while humble. Like aware of your, like confident in yourself, but aware of your flaws, which I found certainly interesting. And yeah, and so that book really stuck with me. And I've wanted to reread it, and I've tried rereading it, and I have, like, most of it. But there's one section in there that's like, there's one section in there that I find myself hesitating to get into, about like romance and shit. Because while I do like his writing on it certainly a lot, I wonder about its effects on me. Admittedly, it's been like years since I read it, so I might be inaccurately remembering it. But I don't know. Perhaps I could find levity in it, or perhaps I could not. Perhaps it would be depressing. But so that book is kind of a lot of like, it's where the point of like economics, it like gets into like political philosophy, I guess. And by that I mean like where the point of like political philosophy and metaphysics, I guess, would be the terms that you could use, the buzzwords. And by that I just mean like the points to where economics and math get to such a degree that it starts, homie, what are you doing? What was that? Come on. I don't know. So I like that book a lot. And so that's why I got the other Scott Galloway book that I have. My butt is getting sore in this chair. I may need a break soon. But so like that's kind of why I've been looking more into nonfiction and philosophy and stuff, because again, I always find those things kind of interesting. And I had previously read some excerpt when the myth of Sisyphus meme was going off. I read some excerpt from the book, I think, that I found interesting, and so that's why I've been more so preferential to absurdist philosophy ever since.